Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. 12 o'clock here in Nigeria. First, the highlights. Well, all eyes on the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, which swings into full gear with 180 days to make a decision on several petitions. But this has now been described as a test of the judiciary's independence. Well, the countdown continues. 2 days to supplementary elections for governorship and assembly seats. The APC and Labour Party in Imo State trade words amidst allegations of collusion. And a focus on the education agenda of the incoming government and the challenges that have plagued the sector across levels. What must the government do to fix education? That's a big question. Well, we're starting off with the Election Petition Tribunal, which is now in full swing as it considers the petitions from candidates and political parties who are raising objections to the outcome of the February 25th presidential election. Well, the major parties challenging the victory of Senator Bola Tinubu of the APC at the first runner-up, that's Mr. Atiku Abubakar of the PDP, and the second runner-up, Mr. Peter Obi of the Labour Party, on various grounds. So as a spotlight beams on the judiciary to give its decision on an election which has been described as keenly contested, a senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Yemi Kande Johnson, has described this as a test of the judiciary and the impartiality of the courts, as he believes the judges are also on trial in some sense. Well, he also spoke to the burden of proof debate on INEC and what to expect during the process, as he was a guest on our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily.
Is provided by these political contests is the testing of the very independence, impartiality, and rationality of court processes and judgments. And so when, in any case, in an ordinary criminal case, in a commercial dispute, the parties know what the facts are, and very often their lawyers have told them what the law is. The only person who is an indeterminate factor is the judge who decides. And so, in many respects, it is the judge that is on trial in any single case, not just in political cases. But in political cases, that test comes under a very high and searing spotlight, and people look very closely. And because elections are such an emotive and disruptive, high-temperature event, judges have to be aware not only that the decisions they make will affect the political outcomes and the perspectives of people for years to come, but also that judgment of their action may be jaundiced by emotional responses, by political affiliations, by ideology. And some people, regardless of what the courts do, regardless of how clear an opinion is expressed by the court, will not believe it. But that's part of the condition in any political society. If the electoral umpire has the official custody of documents, they should also anticipate that those documents should be ready to be made available immediately upon an election. That is a failure on their part, and it is unacceptable that parties should have to struggle to get the material which is in public custody, which they need to present their case. But having said that, the question that you asked directly about onus of proof, you can't expect them to prove there was no ballot snatching. You can't expect them to prove that there was no falsification. You can't expect them to prove that there was no corruption or bribery. That is a task that is for the person who is challenging the result to anticipate, to gather, to organize, to analyze, and to present. So it's a deflection from the responsibility of the person who has to prove a case in every aspect of civil and criminal law. The legal prescription is that he who asserts must prove. There's a reason for that. Because if you want to make a case, you are the one who should present it. You can't say your failure to disprove that there was irregularity is a foundation for my case. It doesn't make any rational sense.
Now, ahead of Saturday's supplementary elections for 2 governorship seats across 2 states and federal and state assembly elections, particularly in Mbaitoli, Ikeduru federal constituencies, candidates of 2 major contending political parties, the Labour Party and the All Progressives Congress, are bickering over the conduct of the election. But the Labour Party candidate in the election, Uche Ogwagu, is accusing the candidate of the APC, Akarachi Amadi, of allegedly colluding with security operatives to intimidate and harass voters in order to suppress the will of the people. While the candidate of the APC dispels the allegations, he insists that he will not join issues with any opposition party as he's focused on winning the election.
The February 25th National Assembly election in Mbitoli-Ikeduru Federal Constituency was declared inconclusive by the Independent National Electoral Commission in Imo State, following INEC's inability to conduct elections in 19 polling units in Amike Mberi ward and 33 polling units in 12 wards in the federal constituency, with a total number of about 35,000 registered voters. Ahead of the rerun election slated for Saturday, April the 15th, the two major and frontline political parties are trading words.
Let us allow the elections.
The candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Uche Obuagu, is accusing the APC of alleged intimidation, thuggery and harassment of voters in order to sway the minds of the people, while insisting that INEC should not use ad hoc staff in the rerun election.
In that concern which I raised, I had intimated them of the despicable acts of intimidating the peace-loving people of Mbitoli and Ikeru Federal Constituency by thugs, hooligans, cultists who were armed with high-caliber ammunition, among other dangerous weapons, and were asked by the operational leader, Charles Amadi, to maim and disrupt voting processes, cut away voting materials, kidnap election officers, and burn down polling units wherever APC is losing.
However, the APC candidate, Mr. Akarachi Amadi, dispels the allegations. He commends security operatives for doing a good job in the February 25th election and adds that he's not ready to join issues with the opposition as he remains focused on winning.
I remain someone that will not lose my identity because of any election. I have a lot of elections to run because I have a lot of age on my side. So I will not resort to intimidation of the public through any means. I believe that our security agencies have been doing a good job.
The Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC, in Imo State is appealing to INEC and security operatives to ensure that the rerun is conducted in a free and fair atmosphere.
We shall make sure that the use of givers is enforced in accreditation of voters and uploading of polling unit results to the IREV result portals as provided by the INEC regulations and guidelines for the 2023 general elections.
According to INEC, elections will hold in 58 polling units in Ibitoli-Ikeduru Federal Constituency, and rerun elections will take place in Izu, Ahiazu, and Idiato South State constituencies on Saturday, April the 15th.
Well, let's turn our attention to the big discussion. It's a continuation of our series on setting an agenda for the incoming administration, and our focus on the program this afternoon is education. Well, it's been described as the bedrock of any society, but with 20 million out-of-school children in the country, incessant strikes by public institutions as a result of inadequate funding and labor issues, unemployment rate recently projected to hit 41% by the KPMG, the education sector clearly needs a lot of attention. So let's do just that. We are joined on the program by an emeritus professor at the National Open University in Abuja. He had taught philosophy for 30 years at the Premier University of Ibadan. Emeritus Professor Godwin Sogolo is our guest on the program, joins us from our Abuja studio. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Well, the Renewed Hope manifesto of the president-elect had policies on education, including changing accreditation standards and curriculum, student loans. He mentioned that time and again, and the rest. We'll focus on those specifics in the coming moments. But for you, what should be the first major action to take if we must improve our education sector, and by implication, what we get, the product we get from our education system?
Yeah, thank you, Uncle. I believe that one of the areas of priority should be access, improving access in Nigeria universities. Currently, you'll be shocked if you learn about the number of people, of our youths who apply for places in the university, and how many actually succeed. In 2022, for instance, about 1.8 qualified candidates applied for position in Nigerian universities, and less than half succeeded in gaining admission. In other words, almost on an annual basis, we are throwing off, over almost half of our children who are supposed to be in the university. And what that means is that we must improve on access. And that, I will suggest, is one area in which the incoming government must try to do something substantially and urgently too. One of the things that is being done already by the current administration is to try to increase the number of universities. Currently, Nigeria has a total of 222 universities. Some are private. In fact, currently, half of that number, 111, are government-owned, in other words, owned by state and federal government. And the other half, 111, owned by the private sector. So there is a need to improve on the number of universities in Nigeria. Some argue, they say, oh, there are too many universities. But see, if you compare what we have, these 222 universities we have in Nigeria, with what obtains outside in the developed countries, you'll be shocked. The US, for instance, has over 3,000 universities. As a matter of fact, they have 3,216 universities. And then India, for instance, has over 5,000 universities. And Brazil has over 2,000 universities. Now, if you compare that with what we have in this country, then, of course, the argument is that we need more universities in order to improve on access. That is the first one. The second area which I want the incoming government to concentrate on is improving pedagogy. What that means is really the content of what you teach out to students, the methodology, the way of presenting, teaching, learning, the processes should be improved upon. That is very, very critical. You see, I graduated in 1972. I think that's so many years ago. I got my PhD in 1976, 47 years ago. Now, you don't expect the menu that was given to me to be given to my grandchildren.
It's very interesting, that analogy.
Now change the content.
Right,
Yes.
Prof. Pardon me. I mean, I love that analogy. But speaking to the access and the pedagogy, I'd just like you to speak specifically now to this plan of student loans. So you mentioned the U.S. This is something that has been used in the U.S. And I wonder for you, do you see that as something that can work for our good, maybe improve funding, and also the access? So, I mean, people can actually rely on loans to get access into schools rather than, depend on their own pockets, which sometimes we know is quite lean. And we're winding down in about a minute, Prof.
Yes, of course, loan to students. Let me say this, that as a student at the University of Ife, then, Obafemi Awolowo University, I had a loan from my state. It was blended then, and almost all states of the Federation were giving loans to students. And the practice, not only in the US, in the UK, in many European countries, loans are provided for students, an arrangement made for payment. Almost every student who is qualified will get a loan. And so I think that's really one way in which we can assist our students. Knowing this kind of society where we are in it's a poverty culture, right? People, not many can afford university education. So we need to really assist people. So that's one area that the incoming government should really think about. You improve, not only give the loan out, but also work out a modality in which payment can be made easy. You don't imprison people for life by saying that, oh, because you have taken a university loan, therefore you must continue to pay all your life. It must make it easy, such that those who have gained from loans should be able to pay with ease.
And I think that's a fantastic point to leave it at. We'd like to thank you so much, Emeritus Professor Godwin Sogolo is an Emeritus Professor at the National Open University in Abuja. He had taught philosophy for 30 years at the Premier University of Ibadan. Thank you once again for your time, sir.
Thank you.
So let's now bring you an update. It's a developing story from the Banana Island area of Lagos State, where a multi-story building collapsed yesterday. Our correspondent, Dari Dawu, is live there where we see some activity. So let's just listen in. Dari, it is a day after that collapse. We see some sort of commotion. Can you walk us through what is going on there and what more information you have for us, Dari?
Journalists outside, and the scene that you saw is the altercation between the exit manager, who said that no press person will come in, and because of the fact that many of the media people who came here in the morning, because of the fact that they waited for hours and without anyone addressing them, they had to be forceful about it, and eventually we were allowed in, and this is what is happening here, because when we got in, also the DG of the Lagos State Emergency.
Well, Dari, pardon me to come in.
Joined us.
All right. Dari, pardon me to come in. There's lots of noise, understandably. There's lots of activities going on right there. So we'll come back to you perhaps when you move to a place that is less noisy so you can give up the updates. But so far, Dari is saying that commotion is as a result of the estate manager preventing pressmen from gaining access, according to the information we have right now. But let's bring you more from the emergency responders. Mr. Okeoson Itolu gives an update as well. We'll take a listen.
When the incident occurred, we moved in swiftly, promptly, effectively, and efficiently with all the primary stakeholders. And you can see that immediately it occurred, our response was swift. It's about 10 minutes. And you can see that, come and look at it. Come and look at the specialized equipment we used. And we got there, our response time was 10 minutes. We moved in with our sophisticated equipment. We used Delta. The life side was divided into 4 quadrants. Now, and we checked each of the quadrants with our Delta, and we did not locate anybody under the debris with our Delta. However, because we are professionals and meticulous about what we are doing, we are using a hammer and excavator with cranes together. We started moving from one layer to another. And during this emergency response, we are able to rescue several people alive. Those people that were rescued were treated on the spot and discharged. It is only one that was taken to a private hospital where he's receiving adequate treatment. Yes. And if you can see that at the outer quadrant, we've already reached what we call ground zero. We are moving to the second, third, fourth quadrant. And believe me, we will get to ground zero in each of these quadrants to ensure transparency, to ensure that nobody is left in there, to ensure that the job is being done professionally. And concerning the other buildings, we are going to carry out holistic investigations.
Well, the head of LASEMA speaking there. Of course, this is a developing story. Our correspondent Darida, who is live there, and we'll be bringing you more updates as they come in. But let's continue with our conversation on setting an agenda for the incoming government, especially in the area of education. We're joined now by Dr. Law Mefo, who's a senior lecturer at International Institute of Journalism, also joining us from our Abuja studio. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you as well for your time. I mean,
Yeah,
we
good
started off...
afternoon. Thank you for hosting me.
Great to have you. We started off a conversation with Emeritus Professor Godwin Sogolo, and he spoke about, getting more access for students who hope to gain admission into tertiary institutions, talked about pedagogy as well. And I'd like to take it from there because there's, time and again, we've talked about, developing our curriculum such a way that it matches, we match the educational instruction with the actual skills needed in the labor market. We're in a period of AI now. It's no more even just, coding, it's AI. The world has since moved on. And I wonder for you, for the incoming government, what would you be advising it to do in that area such that what you learn in school is relevant when you're out of school in the labor market? So you're not just searching for jobs. In fact, you can go ahead and create employment yourself.
Yes, I listened to Professor Sogolo, and his points were quite germane. And I think you have brought in the missing link, and that has to do with quality. Matching what you may call a town and gown, matching the academic curriculum with the actual need of the society. This is not happening at the moment. And for me, that is where the next administration should really concentrate. Total overhaul of the educational sector. For me, there should be a complete state of emergency declared in the sector. Because if you look at the quality of graduates of Nigerians, of Nigeria at the moment, something is really missing. And if you compare it with Nigerian educational system in the 60s and 70s, even up to the 80s, you would discover that there has been a very radical transformation, from positive to the negative. In the past, you would see that the feeder levels, primary, secondary, very great, very wonderful, very appropriate. But today, if you go to the public sector particularly, the primary education system has completely collapsed. The same thing has happened at the secondary level. And you don't expect the tertiary level to be so wonderful when the foundation is so faulty. That is why I am calling for a total overhaul. So not only ensuring that curriculum really matches our needs as a nation, you need to also ensure that those who get into the tertiary institutions like the universities particularly are actually qualified. If you look at what is going on at the moment, the quality control is so terrible. Many faculties in the country are understaffed. You don't have a quality manpower. You don't have a qualified manpower. You don't therefore have an output that can be relied upon. What will the service the Nigerian knowledge need? Education is meant for knowledge production. It's not for certificate distribution. That is what is going on at the moment. Just distribute certificates. And let me give you a simple example. What you call a banking and finance in the universities, when the graduates come out, do they really go into the banking sector without having to be retrained? They have to be retrained for upward of 6 months, which shows that there is something wrong with where they are coming from. It shows that clearly there is a disarticulation between the academic need and the knowledge base itself. That is what has to be addressed by the incoming administration. Overhaul it. And you see, yes, I agree that we may need more universities. But the number is not the issue here, as far as I am concerned. How many of these 220 universities in Nigeria are actually universities in the real sense of the word? If there ought to be what we call irreducible minimum, that will make an institution
the standard,
an institution. Can you say the standard, the irreducible minimum standard that there must be in place for you to regard an institution university? You don't have that at the moment.
Let me follow up with this,
Doctor.
If
you go to...
pardon me, yes. I just need to make this point as we wind down because of time. And the point is that, yes, looking at the manifesto, the plans, you see the change in the curriculum, and you've mentioned a very germane point, those standards. But to what extent, really, can the federal go in ensuring that these these reforms are really implemented, when you have a role for the local government, the state government, don't forget the LGA, the SUBEBs, and the likes. So what roles are there for them to play? Because, I mean, the law is even clear on the fact that the Houses of Assembly should also be able to make laws for the state. So it can't just happen at the federal. So how do you see them working together?
The educational system is holistic. Ordinarily, primary education is supposed to be taken care of at state level and, in fact, at local government level. And by the time you come to state and all that, you would see that their concern would have to be tertiary and, of course, the federal government. But it is a problem at the moment because if you check the essence of UBEB, universal basic education you have in the country, is supposed to address basic education. Basic education here is primary to the junior secondary school. And, so you can see that your observation is quite germane. It means that since the federal government has taken interest by creating such critical agency to address basic education, both what you call the primary education, secondary, will have to be part of it. It then means that there has to be rules created for local governments, for states, and of course, working in conjunction with the federal government.
Absolutely.
But do you have you don't have local government system anymore in the country. It's a big problem. In all honesty, local government administration has collapsed. It has been removed from the equation, whether we like it or not. If you check through, you can't find more than maybe half a dozen of states in Nigeria that have conducted what we call local government elections in the last 1 decade. So this shows you that we can't talk about local government here. And meanwhile, they ought to be the ones supervising primary education. So
well, Dr. Lome,
I'm calling for a total overhaul.
Very instructive words there.
Curriculum,
right. Pardon me, very instructive words there. And I think it's a great one to take on board for the incoming governments, really. If we say that we want to make education work, then we have to do the work. We'd like to thank you so much, Dr. Lome, for Senior Lecturer, International Institute of Journalism. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you.
Well, let's now take you across states now. It's a political season, so you understand why there is so much happening across the states. And well, the All Progressives Congress in Kano State has filed a petition before the Governorship Election Petition Tribunal challenging the declaration of Abba Kabir as the winner of the election. And also, in the Southeast state, ahead of the inauguration of the 10th Assembly, the coalition of APC support groups is advocating for the office of the President of the Senate to be zoned to the Southeast, addressing journalists in Abuja after submitting a letter of appeal to the National Working Committee of the party. The spokesperson of the group says the interests of equity and justice, zoning of the office of the Senate President to the Southeast will promote politics of inclusivity and national cohesion. And there you see civil society organizations have continued to weigh in on the outcome of the 2023 presidential election. Now, while some are calling on the political parties to work together for national unity, others want the president-elect to ensure that he delivers on his promises. And ahead of the April 15th, that Saturday's supplementary elections in Kano State, the Independent National Electoral Commission has held a meeting with the Kano State Police Command, representatives of political parties and the media at its headquarters in the state. The Kano State Resident Electoral Commissioner, Zango Audu, said the commission is confident in its readiness to conduct free and fair rerun polls on Saturday. Well, that's the program for this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Kayode Okikiolu. Stay with Channels Television. We have more updates for you, plus a developing story on Banana Island in Lagos, where a multi-story building collapsed. Goodbye.